Morning everybody, I'm so glad you're here with me and welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead. I want to talk about this guy right here, the almighty greenhouse. I want to tell you the absolute truth behind it. I've been using it for, this will be my third winter with it, and what I've noticed from it and the upsides and the downsides with it, because there's plenty of them. But I want to tell you the absolute truth about this greenhouse, and if you're looking to get a greenhouse, what you may want to look for instead. This is my greenhouse. It's a 6x8 PAL Ram hybrid greenhouse, and these are polycarbonate panels on it, so basically plastic. And there's there's upsides and downsides to all of it. We've done a couple upgrades and we'll go over all that, but we do grow in it, and we grow in it quite successfully at certain times of the year, but we've had to make a few adjustments to it to keep it going. When I read about it at first and we decided to get it, we knew we wanted to get a greenhouse, but I didn't really know a whole lot about greenhouses. And I've seen people do all kinds of things with these things. And now this doesn't just apply to a PAL Ram hybrid greenhouse. Basically, from what I understand and the way the world works these days, anything that has this type of design to it is more than likely made by the same manufacturer, but it could be branded differently. So, you know, a lot of different clothes and stuff like that, it's all the same. It's made in the same factory, but people will brand it. And what I mean by branding it is you simply get the name up here engraved in it or embossed, whatever. It's tiny details. But we've got this greenhouse, and the first year we had it, we struggled greatly. So the truth be told, these polycarbonate panels in it, they're great. They're very flexible. If something hits them, a lot of times it'll just bounce off. You can replace them easily. So in that aspect of it, it works well. Like I said, this is our third year having it, and we haven't had, I was worried about the plastics breaking down in it, which could be an issue because, you know, sun and plastic does not mix very well at all. But we haven't had that. But the problem with this greenhouse is twofold. It's weird. It's like it gets really hot during the day. So we're having a really warm spell right now in November, and I'm in zone 8A in North Carolina, so keep that in mind through all of this. But it's in the 80s today, low 80s, maybe 78, something like that. And then you walk inside and it's about 85, 90 degrees. So it's not ideal, but in the wintertime that really helps, especially in our area where we don't get below freezing and stay there. If you don't and you get below freezing and you stay there and you keep this thing shut up, so you keep the door shut, you keep this panel up here, which it comes with a panel. We did have to add this hydraulic automatic opener on. If you keep the windows shut, and it does not come with this either, so we've added this, it will warm up during the day. The first major issue is, even though it'll warm up during the day, the temperature as it's purchased from the factory at night will be the exact same as it is outside. So if it gets 25 degrees outside, it's going to be 25 degrees inside. And I even, believe it or not, actually had it get cooler in here than it did outside because of the moisture in here and stuff like that. So we definitely had issues with that at first, and we've made some additions to combat that. So the first year we luckily we had a warm winter, and because if you remember one of the earlier videos I did a couple weeks ago was about, you know, the true key to growing in the winter and fall, and that's the rebound temperature, and that's where this thing really shines, because as soon as the sun hits it, the temperature just skyrockets. And it's luckily where we are, we get shaded, so the sun comes up right in that corner there, and so we'll get an early morning ray of sun, and that really does start to warm it up almost immediately. But it was kind of depressing because I couldn't do what I really thought I was going to do, and I had to adjust my plan for the greenhouse. Now, I went into the greenhouse with the expectations of, yes, I was going to definitely grow through here all through the winter, I wasn't really expecting to grow your summer crops like squash, zucchinis, tomatoes, peppers, stuff like that in the middle of winter. But what I was expecting is to be able to start them earlier in the season. And that didn't really work out the best for me, because the way we had to monitor the temperatures for the year and the way we saw the temperatures fluctuating through the early spring just didn't really work out for us. And over the years, like this next spring, we'll try and push it a little bit more and more, but we don't really want to waste a whole bunch of time doing it in this greenhouse when we can get crops to grow throughout the winter, and successfully, might I add. So there is that aspect of it. And the only thing we had to adjust is we had to get it so we would get crops that were cold tolerant, frost tolerant in the greenhouse, and that way we knew they could thrive through the winter. So that was a big aspect of it. But again, if it's getting to 25 degrees at night and it's 25 degrees in here, other than the rebound temperature, there was no real ultimate benefit to it where the cost of this greenhouse would outweigh the cost of a low tunnel. I can build a low tunnel for $25. So I could put low tunnels on all of my beds, all 10 beds. I think I have 11 beds, excuse me, and be way under the budget of this greenhouse, because even just to build it, we had to build the foundation on top of it. So we brought in these 4x4s and we laid them down and leveled the ground and everything and built on top of it, because you may not realize it, but this is just aluminum and plastic. And I can literally, if it wasn't attached to this base, I could push up on here and the whole greenhouse would lift up. It only weighs like 100 pounds or something stupid like that. So I can get this off the ground, and technically if I had to and it wasn't attached, I could move this from spot to spot in my yard just by standing in the middle of it, pushing it and walking it forward. And I know some people, that's not their story, but if you had two people, you could do that. So that made it really susceptible to storms and stuff like that. And I didn't really want to take that chance of losing my greenhouse and everything I had. And a lot of the problems that came with it being real flimsy and stuff was just simply because it wasn't on a good foundation. So we had to eliminate that right off the bat. So you take the cost of the greenhouse, and then you're going to add another couple $100 immediately just to go ahead and put a foundation down. One hope I had for the greenhouse was, yes, I can grow in the wintertime, but maybe I can actually grow in the summertime as well. And that was absolutely not the case whatsoever. We tried to grow in it this summer and it just did not work out very well. And I mean, that's simply just because it is incredibly hot in there in the summertime. In May, we're regularly getting into the 90s in here. We've even got into the like 105, 107 at times, and plants just really struggle with that. So there was that issue. And the other thing too is there is absolutely no rain that gets in here, so you get no outside help for watering, which you may not think is an issue, but when you have a garden the size that we do, because we have another 4 beds over here and then another bed here, right here, then watering becomes a big issue, and it makes it very difficult. And I even toyed with the idea of like pulling the panels out in the summertime, because that would allow the heat to escape and also let the rain come in. But the problem is every single piece of this greenhouse is used for the stability of it. And that's something that we did not want to take a chance on. Now you may be thinking like, what's the point in having a greenhouse if you can't grow in it year round? And I mean, the answer was simply to extend our season almost indefinitely. Now we can grow out in our gardens for the most part throughout the winter. Things go dormant and they kind of slow down. And even in here, because of the sunlight, it does the same thing, but it speeds up a lot faster. So we're able to harvest more often. We're able to keep it going. But I mean, let's face it, this is a 6x8 greenhouse. We've got the outside of it is a U for the planting. They're 2-foot beds. You're going from 11 beds to 1 bed essentially, and it's almost, well, it is the same size as the other bed, so we're going down to 1 bed only, so we're definitely losing a little bit of it. Now we had to do some modifications to it in order to eliminate that temperature drop in the evenings, where it would go from 90 degrees during the day, and sometimes let's say if it gets to be in the mid 70s, it'll be right around before we did any of our modifications, about 92 degrees. And then the temperature would drop down to 35. And we may get temperatures, and the temperature in here will be 35 degrees. So that's a huge temperature change. So if you think about it, and we slow the heating process up, or lower the high heat in here, and then raise the minimum heat, then we're eliminating that huge temperature swing. Not eliminating, but we're definitely limiting it. And we did a couple things to manage it. And now one thing I didn't realize is with a greenhouse in my area, it's not necessarily about heating it, it's about cooling the greenhouse. That is the most important part of it. As far as cooling it goes, the first step was to get the automatic window for it. So as this has wax in the cylinder. As the temperature rises, the wax loosens and it pushes it up. And as it gets cold, it hardens and it brings it down. So that was the first and foremost, because I'm not going to come out here every day in time and open it and shut it and all that stuff. Now, the only thing that it did help with, or did come with, was this nice huge door that once you open it, you can get wind in here, and then the wind can come up and go through here. But we still had issues with it, and we wanted more, because this is the same temperature as before, where it would be like 90 plus degrees in here. So then we added this solar powered fan here. And this doesn't bring the air in. What it does is it takes the heat that builds up here and it sucks it out through the window. And this really does help. So this lowered the temperature a couple degrees in here. And the benefit of it, since it's solar paneled, when the sun doesn't hit it, it doesn't work. And I also, I can flip the switch if I really want. But I've had this up here for about a year now. And it's showing some age, but it's working just fine. I would like to have a bigger fan, and I may end up upgrading at some point, either to a bigger fan or 2 fans to pull more of that air out, but that's gonna help a lot. And this year, what we did in order to make it a little bit better is we put in this louver window. So you can just open it and shut it. It does not automatic, but it's not the end of the world if you leave it shut, because we know what to deal with. The whole thing about using this greenhouse for as long as we did without anything in it and monitoring the temperatures, we were able to keep that going and just keep an eye on the temperatures. And I kind of know in my head what the temperatures will be roughly. And we monitor the temperatures. We have a wireless thermometer, which I'll show you the sensor. We've got this sensor here, and it's actually in the Amazon link below. So if you want to use that, it's somewhere buried in there, but this is Bluetooth to your phone. So you can get a whole chart, and if you don't check it every day, you can come back and check it and look at it. I got temperatures for like the last year. So this works out really good, and we just leave it hanging. I leave it hanging in the middle here because it's not in the cooler air and it's not in the hotter air. It's right in the middle, so it kind of works out good. And we also have it positioned within our heating system, because the one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that there was absolutely no electricity run to this. I'm not interested in running electricity. I'm not interested in paying for electricity. I'm not interested in heating it and paying for the heat. And I'm not interested for running lights in here and having this thing looking like a damn city at night. I want it to be nice and quiet. I believe plants need a period of darkness. And I believe that if I did anything to disrupt that it just messes with the nature, the flow of nature. So we didn't want to do that. So we had to build a passive solar heating system for it. So this is the second iteration of it, and I believe it's going to be the final iteration of it. We've got these 15-gallon tanks here, and we filled them up with water and painted them black. And so they have really made a big difference. So my first year, I came out here and I knew I had to do something immediately, and I took 5-gallon buckets and just stacked them on top of each other, and I think I did like maybe 2 in each side or something. And it helped a little bit. We would get like a degree warmer, but this is doing about, on the coldest days, 4 or 5 degrees. And on the warmer days, we can get it 7 degrees warmer at night. And all that does is, as this greenhouse heats up, it soaks up the heat in the water, and then it radiates out at night and raises the ambient temperature in here. So that's a huge help. So now we've lowered the high temperature, we've raised the lower temperature, And now we've got something that we can work with. Now I could put bigger tanks in here, not interested in that, but I could, and probably raise it even more. But I do believe that there is an actual point in which you don't have, you get your thermal capacity going on. I mean, you're not gonna get it but so warm, because this thing is full of air leaks. This right here leaks air here at night. This door leaks air at the seams. It is not meant to be airtight. And then all along the base leaked air too. Now I did come back and caulk all the way around, and that has helped. I put up weather stripping on all these other spots. Didn't matter. The weather stripping just fell off. It just wasn't made for that. So you just kind of got to deal with it. But I also believe that good airflow is really important. And if you're growing the right crops, you can get that air coming in, and it can help with you and help cycle it out, because you have to monitor your humidity levels in these as well. And that's when this window coming up, the heating up in the day, it lowers the humidity. Getting that air flowing really helps. So there is that aspect. And as far as security for the greenhouse goes, and security I mean blowing away, we did put hurricane straps in. This was like a $10 kit, super simple. You just basically throw a wire over it, and then you screw it into the ground and it holds it down. So we did that, and that has really helped. And for the irrigation, we built an in-ground drip irrigation system. So you can see here the hoses that go in. This has really helped as well. And I mean, you can see everything's growing. I don't ever come in here with a watering can or anything unless I'm starting seeds. And I did reseed some spinach recently, so I am coming out and hitting those, but otherwise it just waters it just fine. So 2 questions come to mind. One, is this a greenhouse? First answer, no, it is not a greenhouse. It is a cold frame at best, but it is a big cold frame that I'm 6'2". I can move around in there, and I can really work in there, and that is big for me. I didn't have to rummage for any parts or anything. I could put it up. It looks nice in my garden. So there is that aspect to it. And then the second question is, am I happy with my purchase? Yes, I am. It does exactly what I needed to do for my area. Now, if I lived further up north, you'd have to do more than that. You'd have to maybe insulate the walls a little bit. You'd have to add a little bit more solar heating if you wanted, or actually put a heater in there. You had to do stuff like that. For me, I also forgot to mention, I do throw a shade cloth over the top of it, and that lowered it in the summertime. The temperature down about, I'd say roughly 5 or so degrees in the summertime. Still not enough, but we did do that. So just to kind of head off any questions about that. So we did do that, but there's other options out there if you're willing to pay for them. I mean, this greenhouse behind me is definitely called a greenhouse, but it's not. But if you have the money and you get yourself a glass greenhouse that's built for insulation, you are going to get what you want out of it. You'll be able to run a heater. You'll be able, I mean, you can even get cooling systems for them. They open up, the panels are replaceable. You'll have to clean them. The difference is they're gonna be about $5,000 to $6,000. There's a huge cost difference. But if you're living in a colder area, a glass greenhouse is probably gonna be what you more than likely want, especially if you're looking to get brave and grow tomatoes or something like that. It's gonna be a lot easier to pull off. I just didn't need it because essentially I have this structure that for half the year I can use, and it's even questionable for a couple months out of it. But then I don't, the other half of the year it doesn't get used at all and just sits there. And it kind of becomes, it's not an eyesore by any means, but once the weeds take over inside or something, it gets a little bit stressful. Not that you can't overcome it, but it's still something you got to deal with. I've contacted PalRam a few times about working with them, and that tells you how much I really enjoy this greenhouse, and that's why I make videos in it, and I support it. I think it was a great decision by me. It works for my needs. I think it's just a personal decision on what you want to use to grow in the season. But for a 6x8 greenhouse, it took me 24 hours to put up using 2 people and a fairly minimum cost. It's really not that bad. I know I have bad mouthed a little bit, but there are definitely aspects to it that are great. And I mean, for instance, let's just look at this. I mean, we're ready to harvest in here and it's still warm out. So we'll be able to harvest this, replant, and get a second harvest out of it. And coming into my 3rd season using this greenhouse, that's good news. I don't know anybody that would say anything different. When I'm starting to get multiple harvests out of here, that means I'm starting to figure it out. So it takes time to learn it, but just be patient and just know what you're getting into when you get one. And personally, I think it's a good buy. Goodbye.